meaning the Mormon background. I was, without my family, excommunicated from the church after we voted against a church leader, and that was 6 or 7 years ago. So, but we don't endorse. That's just full disclosure. So I'm acquainted with the arguments and the backgrounds and the research of the restoration of the gospel, and what by the term restoration of the gospel, what the Mormons, what they mean by that term is that under their theology, they say that the historically mainstream theology got a little bit out of focus, and it needed a supercharge of in the latter days of angelic administration that occurred in connection with Joseph Smith in the latter times. Joseph Smith is a controversial figure. I come from a somewhat a unconventional view of him, is that I see him as a unique and individual, but I have had some of my listeners of the show send me some videos about the false prophecies of Joseph Smith and 50 false things about the Mormon Church. So let's do some reaction videos. And the reason why I'm doing this, though, is that this is an example of people in the country that try to shut down diversity of thought, and it's a toxic attitude that tries to enforce that everybody should think alike. That's not how America goes. But this is the bread and butter of cancel culture that tries to shut down diversity of thought. So let's talk about Joseph Smith. Here's the first video. This is the false prophecies of Joseph Smith.
Revelations were proven false and fraudulent. How can we possibly accept anything in the Book of Mormon or anything Smith ever said?
As a Christian, I trust the Bible to be the Word of God. In ancient times, God spoke to his chosen people through his prophets. God knew there would be other men pretending to be prophets, but who were no more than mere counterfeits.
You're right, Ava. And God gave us a foolproof test to know if someone is a true prophet of God. It says in Deuteronomy 18:22, when a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the thing does not happen or come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord has not spoken, but the prophet has spoken it presumptuously. Thou shalt not be afraid of him. And in Jeremiah 14:14, then the Lord said unto me, the prophets prophesy lies in my name. I sent them not, neither have I commanded them, neither spake unto them. They prophesy unto you a false vision and divination, and a thing of naught, in the deceit of their heart.
It seems that Joseph Smith fits those descriptions. Didn't he make prophecies that did not come to pass?
Quite a few. There's a classic example in LDS church history called the Canadian Copyright Episode. This event was recorded during the winter of 1829 and 1830 in a publication called An Address to All Believers in Christ, page 30-31, by David Whitmer, one of the three witnesses of the Book of Mormon. When Smith desperately needed more money to complete the printing of the Book of Mormon, his brother Hiram Smith suggested to Joseph that some men could go to Canada and sell the copyright to the Book of Mormon. Smith agreed to ask the Lord by looking into the hat in which he placed the seer stone.
I guess a traditional prayer wasn't reliable enough for an answer to this question.
Joseph claimed he received a revelation that some of the brethren should go on a mission to Toronto, Canada. There, they would be successful in selling the copyright. So Hiram Page and Oliver Cowdery traveled to Toronto, but they were unable to sell the copyright and returned without any money. Smith was asked point blank why God had forsaken them, having commanded them to go.
That must have been discouraging for Hiram and Oliver.
Joseph didn't know why the prophecy didn't come to pass. So surprisingly, he inquired of the Lord by going back to the same seer stone in a hat to get an explanation from God.
That seems so bizarre. What did Joseph Smith conjure up this time?
He was told that the initial revelation was not from God after all. He then supposedly received a new revelation. Smith said, some revelations are of God, some revelations are of men, and some revelations are of the devil.
So Smith admitted that he could not actually tell if his ideas came from God, from Satan, or simply out of his own head, or in this case, the hat. But then how could Smith even be sure this second revelation was from God?
Okay,
How
so
could he ever be sure of any revelation?
okay, so this right, so that's the basic gist of it, and some revelations are of God, some of men, or of the devil, indeed. And this was the comment that I put on the video about it, and this was in response to one of the listeners of the show sending me these clips, and. But this did not mean that God did not initially send Joseph Smith's party off to Toronto to sell the copyright and then hedge up their way to prevent it from being accomplished, to reinforce to the saints the sanctity of maintaining the copyright to the work, to not let control of it be lost. This has given Joseph Smith somewhat cavalier attitude to the 115 pages which he let Martin Harris have, and so he didn't quite sense, I don't think, the gravity of what he was doing. And there's times when the Lord will, and this is the way he works with me, and he's worked in other examples in church history, where, like with the Zion's Camp March, where the Lord told the saints to go redeem Zion, and then so they formed a battalion to go redeem the land of Zion that it was taken from them here in Independence, but it didn't pan out in the way that initially it didn't occur in the way that they conceived of it. But in the process of it, things came out. They got a lot of testing, and they got a wisdom developed, and a lot of training for the church later on that came out of it. Similarly, see, other things can come out of when the Lord tells you to move in a particular direction. Incidental things come out, like they did proselytizing when they were up in Toronto, when they were out there, or you learn different things, and there's that can come incidental, that can come out of things. And there's other examples of that others have posted in reaction to this video, of things where Isaiah prophesies that Damascus will no longer be a city but will become a heap of ruins, which wasn't literally fulfilled. Or Isaiah says that the hand of the Egyptians over to the power of the cruel master, and a fierce king will rule over them, and declare that the waters will dry up and the riverbed parts dry. There's just lots and lots of stuff. Or Matthew that says, I tell you the truth, some who are standing here will not taste of death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that the Lord wants to move people's hearts, or move them in a particular direction, and they're prompted and guides people, because he has to work in the parameters of humanity's free agency. So he will not, like, put them in a particular way, and things will come out in the process. So that's on that particular thing. And then we see there's another video. Let's press pause on this one. Let me pull it up. Let's see here. Here is another video. Here's a video on 50 more problems with the Mormon church. Here it is. Let's just go through some of these.
The Book of Mormon details a curse put upon Lamanites by God because of their wickedness, which made them dark, loathsome, filthy, and utterly unenticing to the righteous white-skinned Nephites. While some racist references to Nephites being white and delightsome have been sanitized in modern printings, the curse of repulsive dark skin remains as a major plot device in the Book of Mormon. Similar racist teachings about the curse of Cain are also woven into the Book of Abraham, which teaches the descendants of Ham were despised because they were black, had no place among the children of Adam, and could not hold the priesthood. While these teachings remain in current printings of canonized LDS scripture, the LDS Church claims to disavow such theories in their essay, Race and the Priesthood.
Okay,
Brigham Young
so
fought to make and keep Utah a slave territory, despite slavery formerly being illegal in the Mexican territory that Utah displaced. He appealed to LDS scripture and doctrine to support his pro-slavery position. At least 100 African slaves were brought to Utah by LDS members, and many Native Americans were purchased from local tribes. Slavery continued in the Utah Territory until abolition was forced upon it by the U.S. government in 1862.
Okay, so let's pause on just over this. Okay, so this is the issue on race. Brigham Young was no Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith ordained a black man to the priesthood in the Nauvoo era. The It's true in the Book of Mormon. It does talk about the curse of, and their skin was turned dark because they had fallen from the Lord, and they were cursed, and the skin of blackness came upon them. It doesn't mean that the people that are dark skin are cursed today. If you choose to interpret that way, that shows a malignant intent, which is not warranted. Same with Cain. So, but what Brigham Young and the church had a somewhat paternalistic view on the priesthood. I think because they wanted the civil rights to occur, to not put a target on the black people if they were put in positions of authority, and end up like Martin Luther King. But the true curse, though, was falling from God, from separation from God. And it says that they were cursed at the time. It doesn't say that they're cursed now. And that Jesus says, judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. So the people that choose to have that, I mean, there's so many amazing things in the Book of Mormon, but they're like flies that flit and frenzied for the merest speck of dung, and oblivious to the merest flowers and fragrances of the garden. And there's tremendous poignancy and spiritual power that's in the Book of Mormon, but that's all the fetish that they have. That seems like the only thing that they can focus on.
Brigham Young, the Nauvoo Legion slaughtered around 100 members of the Timpanogos tribe, many of whom had never attacked Mormon settlements. Squaw Peak is named after Big Elk's wife, who died in the canyon during the massacre. 7 unarmed Timpanogos were also killed by Mormons at the Battle Creek Massacre for the crime of stealing horses, though no horses had actually been stolen.
Okay, so
Brigham Young.
This is the one of the things that they talk about, or that happened historically. It was a sad episode in history, and some of the Mormons went buck wild on these people, and a lot of it is due. It's remarkable, though. I mean, for the most part, the Mormons kept their dignity, and given that the persecutions that the Mormons were subjected to, there was a lot of pent-up rage, to say the least. They've been kicked around and booted around, houses destroyed, property, families killed and raped, and for decades. But for the most part, I mean, this is a sad episode, no doubt. And this was in the late 1800s, and I forget the name. The Mountain Meadows Massacre. That's what they always talk about. The Mountain Meadows Massacre. But the thing is, this is surprising that there's really, for the most part, though, that the saints kept their dignity for the most part. Even Joseph Smith had the most organized, the largest military force in the United States, in the heartland of the United States of his day, called the Nauvoo Legion. He was the general of the Nauvoo Legion. And if he wanted to turn things into a bloody Civil War mess, he well could have. He had added the levers of command for his generalship.
I also heard that the prophet Joseph Smith ran for president.
He did.
So that tells you where his heart was.
Right.
A heart of a leader. And and if we're going to concentrate on the bad things about Joseph Smith, we won't get anywhere, because let's concentrate on the good that he did. The good is he brought forth the Book of Mormon, and I just see good fruit. I see the godly families that are now united.
Right.
And a lot of good came out of it.
That's exactly the fruit involved. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Mormons and Joseph Smith, they're peculiar and unique. When I look at him, it's peculiar. He's too peculiar and unique to not be credible. It puts it in a different category than like fraud. Yeah, I agree, controversial, but let's keep going here.
The plural marriage was necessary for salvation. The practice continued for 25 years until the U.S. government formed the Edmunds-Tucker Act in 1887, which threatened seizure of all church assets and temples unless polygamy ceased. While presiding from exile, President John Taylor penned a revelation stating that plural marriage would never be rescinded. 3 years after his death, Wilford Woodruff became prophet. With the government finally ready to enforce the act, Woodruff penned the 1890 Manifesto. This manifesto was presented as the official end of plural marriage, but 250 new plural marriages were secretly performed, including those of LDS apostles. Joseph F. Smith was forced to pen a second manifesto in 1904, this time actually enforcing it in order to appease the government. 2 apostles resigned in protest and were excommunicated. LDS church leaders actively fought against the civil rights movement.
Okay, so all right, so this is the issue of plural marriage. Where the plural marriage comes from is in the Old Testament, or in the Bible. There's over 30 or 40 men that are involved with it in the Bible. Many of these men, it doesn't say expressly that they're polygamists, but it says that they've got 30 or 40 kids, and so you just you do the inference there. And so the restoration of the gospel brings back power, spiritual power from the past, and so other things that come from the biblical tradition comes along with it. That's basically where it comes from, the plural marriage aspect. And
well, my take on that is that if you are going to say that plural marriage is bad, and you're going to just excommunicate people because they choose to live plural marriage, then are you going to excommunicate Abraham from the Bible, David, Isaac? These forefathers, they were godly men, but yet they had several wives. In some Mormon churches nowadays, we have plural families. I go to a church that some people in my church choose to have plural families, and we're okay with it. But that does not mean that that there's infidelity going on. They have to be very, very committed to the wives that they have, and be faithful and be very godly. And that's what I see at the church I go to.
so if you see, with plural marriage, if it causes people to live bad lives, like leave the church or stop, keeping the commandments or being sincere people, those are bad fruits. Just like anything can be the way that you go about something. Like fire can cook for you, burn for you, right? It's just like anything. It's how something is gone about. If it's done in a manner in which way it goes, in the manner in which it's done.
This church to support civil rights legislation and to reform several LDS policies which discriminated against African Americans, including the priesthood and temple ban. In response, Apostle Ezra Taft Benson called the civil rights movement a communist plot in General Conference. Mark E. Peterson, another apostle, spoke in favor of segregation, suggesting that it was sanctioned by God and ought not be tampered with. Several African American football players from other states' teams refused to play BYU in protest during the late 1960s, and 14 were kicked off the Wyoming team for their stance. In the 1970s, 3 LDS members were excommunicated for criticizing the LDS Church's racial exclusion policies. It wasn't until 1978, and with the possibility of the IRS revoking BYU's tax-exempt status for discrimination, that the church finally reversed its racist policies and allowed black members full church participation. However, interracial dating, and especially interracial marriage, continued to be discouraged by LDS manuals up until 2014. The current prophet, Russell M. Nelson, notably voiced opposition to interracial marriage in 1995, and this counsel has never been rescinded or disavowed. While some LDS...
Okay, so I remember my dad, this was back, I think that was when it was like the 60s, the civil rights era. My dad, he was prompted to pray for the church that they would get, that it was time to open up the priesthood to all people. And he prayed for them. This is during the civil rights, after the country did its job and passed the civil rights. then God opened up the priesthood to all people. But this again was not necessarily what the Joseph Smith, the course that he had done in his life. And so he prayed. My dad prayed for it, and then they gave blacks the priesthood, or opened up the door for them. And then I was born. So every moment of breath in my life, the Mormon Church that I've been on this world, the Mormon blacks have always had the priesthood in the Mormon Church, which is awesome. And that's why we have, one of the reasons we have Martin Luther King we're going to put him on the mural with the founding fathers of America, because he's with what America has become. He's one of the founding fathers of America.
Yeah, that's right. Give honor where honor is due.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes to show it doesn't matter, what race we are. I think it's the heart and where our faith stands,
Mm-hmm.
and the fruit that we bring forth.
And I think about Brigham Young on this issue was status quo, in that I think he was more had his hands full with plural marriage. That was much trying to keep that, or keep on top of that, but it was still not something that Joseph Smith, the pattern. He was not a Joseph Smith. So let's go to the next one. So we've dealt with it. These are the different issues for those that are just tuning in. This is 50 more problems with the Mormon Church.
Proudly point to the fact that Utah was early to recognize the right of women to vote. That recognition came with motives that were far from empowering. At the insistence of George Q. Cannon, who believed that women cannot be trusted without someone to guide and influence them, the Apostles reorganized the Relief Society, replacing unsuitable women with those who were of the right spirit, and were willing to receive the counsel of their priesthood leaders and husbands. These women, in turn, were to teach the sisters and give them proper views concerning consulting the priesthood. By enforcing obedience to priesthood authority, LDS men multiplied their own political influence by controlling the vote of their wives.
Okay. All right, so that assumes that they're controlling the vote of the wives, and the wives aren't controlling the votes of the men. And that also assumes that the two are voting in concert, right? But the Mormon Church has always been for education for women, and they were one of the first states to recognize women as having the right to vote. And
yeah, definitely, women definitely have a voice now.
Mm-hmm.
In the Mormon Church and everywhere. We have come a long way,
Right.
and thank God for good leaders that have backed up that have supported women in leadership. I understand that us women, do not hold the priesthood position, but we're the backbone of the family, and that's a good thing.
So this is something about the church creating solidarity in the family unit is something that the people of faith are very much for, because they, as opposed to for the government taking control. If the like Hillary Clinton did the book about, it takes a village to raise a child. That's if the family's not a cohesive unit. It takes the village. You got to have all these government programs doing this. And so attacking, like destroying, as the family decomposes, you have to have more activist government taking control. So this is not, everybody has to create the solidarity of the family. This is something that's vibrant and important to the LDS, in the LDS thesis. And it's also important for creating and keeping a free people. And this is important for a way that we can reach out to the Latino people as well. It's because they have that beautiful solidarity in the families, and that's a natural thing that keeps the government from having to push its camel's nose in the tent. And so we want to have that. We want to encourage this and stop this thinking that everybody in the country has to think alike. you know, that this ideological fascism, the hostility to the people of faith orientation. This country was built by people that came here because of their faith orientation at the peril of their lives. The pilgrims that came over, their faith orientation was deeper than other types of orientation, even to the point where like three-quarters of them died, you know, coming into braving into the new world. But and so this keeping the vibrancy of faith orientation and equality of ideology, having equal right wing and left wing professors teaching in the education industry. We want to have that. We want to have more supervision over the people's supervision over the different intellectual trades, and not have necessarily so much elitism going on, so that we have more balance, ideology equality, which is important. We just want to maintain freedom and freedom of speech, that you have the right to say what you say and say what you not say. And so this is just an example of a lot of the toxic cancel culture that you see out there. We can keep responding to these videos if you like, addressing a lot of the toxic videos against Joseph Smith out there in the Mormon Church. And but again, this is the Property Therapy Show, and we bring alive the faith orientation sector of society, and we don't necessarily endorse any particular faith orientation, but we show how the belief in, as long as it has a connection to Jesus Christ in an atonement capacity, that's what is crucial, because the humanity is a bloody mess, and it's got to have an atonement figure to help clean up the mess, because he's got too much self-respect to let us back into his presence otherwise, you know, because humanity it's a bloody mess.
And you know, I wanted to say that when I first got here to Independence about 4 years ago, I thought that the Mormon Church was the only Mormon church on the face of the earth. But when I got here to Independence, I realized that there was all these fractions to the Mormon Church.
There are.
You know, the Restoration,
Bickertonites.
yes, all these
Cutlerites.
Exactly, all these groups, and not all Mormons are, you know, going to stay away from coffee and you know, all these rules that they have. And I know some people that are Book of Mormon believers, but you know, they're free to make all these choices, and I thought that was very interesting.
Yes. So this is the Property Therapy Show, and we've talked about the news, things in the news, the food shortages, the Jackson County being reasonable with the faith groups, and the damage, 500,000 in damage in Portland. Tilia Yala surviving and making the national news for the shooting in Arizona, and then local news here, Property Therapy Stories, as is the bushings for the cars and the shortage of the labor at the dump, and the mural starting at the Heritage Center, and then we talked about Joseph Smith on the Property Therapy Show. So this is the Property Therapy gavel, and we will say, radiotherapy court adjourned.